I never thought my career would be threatened by someone I considered a friend. That's the thing about corporate America. It teaches you trust is a luxury you can't afford. My name is Daniel Mercer, 36, Senior Account Executive at Apex Solutions in Chicago. I've spent 8 years climbing the ladder, sacrificing weekends, relationships, and probably a concerning amount of my mental health to get where I am. The corner office wasn't just a space. It was validation that the son of a Pittsburgh steelworker could make it in the cutthroat world of financial consulting. December in Chicago is brutal. Not just the wind that cuts through your overcoat like it's made of tissue paper, but the pressure that builds as year-end evaluations loom. This year was different, though. Our team had landed the Westridge account, a $14 million contract that had the executive floor buzzing. I had led the pitch, stayed up for 3 straight nights finalizing the proposal, and ultimately sealed the deal with a presentation that even our stone-faced CEO, Richard Donovan, had called exceptional. The whispers around the office were that whoever closed Westridge would be looking at a 6-figure bonus and possible promotion to VP. I tried not to think about it. Counting money before it's in your account is the fastest way to disappointment, but it was hard not to imagine what that kind of windfall could mean. Maybe finally putting a down payment on that lakefront property I'd been eyeing, or investing in the tech startup my college roommate had been badgering me about for years. Melissa Hayes was hired 6 months after me. We started as friendly competitors, then became lunch buddies, then confidants who complained about management over after-work drinks at Dearborn Tavern. She was brilliant, ambitious, and had a laugh that made everyone in the room want to be in on the joke. I admired her drive, it reminded me of my own, but I never saw her as a threat. That changed the night of the holiday party. Apex always rents out the top floor of the Drake Hotel for their annual celebration. Open bar, 5-star catering, a live band, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. It's the one night of the year when the hierarchies momentarily dissolve, when the administrative assistants can corner the CFO by the shrimp cocktail, and executives loosen their ties after the 3rd whiskey sour. I was by the bar, nursing my second old-fashioned, watching the Chicago skyline glitter against the December darkness, when Melissa appeared at my side. She looked different, her usual professional demeanor replaced by something harder, colder. "To the Westridge account," she said, clinking her champagne flute against my tumbler. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks. Couldn't have done it without the team," I replied, the practiced humility of someone expecting good news. She leaned in then, her perfume mingling with the scent of expensive champagne. "Your bonus is mine," she whispered, her voice almost lost in the ambient noise of the party. "I've been meeting with Richard privately. He's been very receptive to my ideas about the future of the department." I felt my stomach drop as she pulled back, her expression a perfect mask of professional cordiality. Before I could respond, she was gone, weaving through the crowd toward where Richard stood with the board members. Later that night, I overheard 2 IT guys talking in the bathroom. Apparently, Melissa had been gathering evidence for months. Emails where I'd complained about clients, a presentation where I'd borrowed heavily from a competitor's published strategy paper, an expense report where I'd been admittedly creative with categorization. Nothing criminal, nothing even particularly unusual in our industry, but enough to paint me as a liability if presented in the right light to the right people. I drove home in silence, the city's Christmas lights blurring through my windshield. In my apartment, I poured myself a generous scotch and stared at the framed photo on my bookshelf. Me at 22, standing with my father outside our modest home in Pittsburgh. He had worked 40 years at the mill, coming home with hands so calloused they felt like sandpaper when he'd ruffle my hair. "Never let them see you sweat, Danny boy," he'd tell me, "and always have a backup plan." The backup plan. I walked to my home office and unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was a folder containing documents for a trust fund established by my maternal grandfather, a surprisingly shrewd investor who'd made a fortune in pharmaceuticals in the 1970s. He'd set up accounts for all his grandchildren, with the caveat that the money couldn't be touched until we turned 35 unless in case of emergencies. I'd turned 35 last year but had never accessed the funds. Something about using inherited money felt like cheating to a man who'd built his identity on being self-made. But as I reviewed the statement, just over $1.2 million, I realized this might be exactly the emergency Grandpa Malcolm had envisioned. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I formed a plan. If Melissa wanted to play dirty, she'd find I wasn't the easy target she thought I was. I may have been raised by a steelworker, but I had a financier's blood running through my veins, and it was time to put it to use. Monday morning. I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The holiday party hangover was evident in the sluggish movements and extra-large coffee cups clutched by my colleagues. I nodded greetings but kept moving. My mind focused on the meeting I'd scheduled with our HR director, Janet Whitmore. Janet was a 20-year veteran of corporate politics who'd seen every maneuver in the book. She was fair but unsentimental, with a reputation for handling situations with surgical precision. "This is quite an accusation, Daniel," she said after I laid out what I'd overheard. I hadn't mentioned the trust fund or my plans, just Melissa's whispered threat and the concerning patterns I'd noticed in recent weeks. "I'm not asking for any action right now," I clarified. "I just want this conversation documented, and I'd like to know if there have been any unusual meetings scheduled between Melissa and Richard." Janet's expression remained neutral, but I caught the slight narrowing of her eyes. "You know I can't share confidential scheduling information." "Of course." I nodded, standing to leave. "I understand the position you're in." As I reached the door, she spoke again. "Daniel, be careful. Office politics can get ugly fast. Make sure whatever you do next is something you can live with seeing in an email chain during discovery." Her warning followed me back to my desk, where I found an email from Richard's assistant. The year-end review meetings had been moved up. Mine was now scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. The accelerated timeline confirmed my suspicions. I needed to move quickly. During lunch, I called my financial advisor and initiated the process to access my trust fund. The money would be available within 48 hours. Next, I reached out to 3 of my largest client contacts. Not officially poaching, just casual conversations to test the waters. The responses were encouraging. They valued my work more than their relationship with Apex. By mid-afternoon, I'd drafted a detailed memo outlining my contributions to the Westridge deal, complete with a timeline, email records, and testimonials from the client. I forwarded it to the entire executive team with a subject line reading, "Westridge Success Analysis, Lessons for Future Acquisitions." It was a power move, both showcasing my value and creating a paper trail that would make it difficult for anyone to minimize my role. As I sent it, I noticed Melissa watching me from across the office floor, her expression unreadable. I smiled and raised my coffee mug in a mock toast. That evening, I received a text from Trevor Lawson, my former mentor who'd left Apex 2 years ago to start his own boutique consulting firm. "Heard rumblings about trouble in paradise. Dinner tomorrow? Morton's at 8. I texted back a thumbs-up emoji and felt a flicker of hope. Trevor had tried to recruit me when he left, but I'd been too comfortable, too loyal to Apex. Perhaps that loyalty had been misplaced. The next morning, I dressed with particular care. My best suit, my lucky tie, the cufflinks my father had given me when I graduated business school. "For the big meetings," he'd said, though I knew he'd had to save for months to afford them. Richard's office occupied the northeast corner of our floor, with views of both the lake and the city. He sat behind a massive desk of polished walnut, barely looking up from his computer as I entered. "Daniel, take a seat." I remained standing. "Actually, Richard, I'd prefer to start by asking a question. Has a decision already been made regarding the Westridge bonus?" He looked surprised by my directness. "We're still evaluating overall team contributions." "That's interesting," I replied, "because I have it on good authority that promises have already been made." Richard's expression hardened. "Sit down, Daniel." I took a seat, but maintained eye contact. "I've been with Apex for 8 years. I've consistently exceeded targets, built our strongest client relationships, and just delivered the biggest account in the company's history. I think I deserve transparency." What followed was 40 minutes of corporate theater, Richard alternating between vague reassurances and subtle criticisms of my team integration and collaborative approach. The subtext was clear. Melissa had gotten to him, and the decision was already made. "We value your contributions, Daniel, but we're moving in a direction that requires a different leadership style in the upper echelons." I nodded slowly, a sense of calm settling over me. "I understand completely." Richard looked relieved, likely expecting an argument. "I'll be expecting the standard performance bonus as outlined in my contract," I continued. "As for the Westridge bonus, I'll let my work speak for itself. If the company decides that's not sufficient, I'll accept that decision." As I stood to leave, I added casually, "By the way, I've been meaning to update you on the Westridge implementation. They're thrilled with our work, especially the custom analytics dashboard we developed. Mr. Westridge specifically mentioned how it's already identified over $3 million in potential savings." I saw the flicker of alarm in Richard's eyes. The dashboard had been my initiative, one I hadn't fully briefed him on yet. The success metric I just mentioned would make it very difficult to justify denying me credit for the account. "Send me the details," he said, his tone careful. "Already did. In yesterday's memo. I'm sure you'll get to it soon." I smiled and walked out, feeling his eyes on my back. At Morton's that night, Trevor wasted no time getting to the point. "They're restructuring the department. Melissa's being groomed for your position. Word is they'll announce after the new year, give you a generous severance, and expect you to train her for a month before you go." I sipped my bourbon, unsurprised. "And you know this how?" "Still got friends on the inside. Plus, I golf with Stanley from the board." Trevor leaned forward. "Come work with me, Dan. Bring your clients, get equity from day one. We'll double what you're making at Apex within 18 months. "What about non-competes?" Trevor grinned. "That's the best part. Their new contracts have a massive loophole. My lawyer nearly fell out of his chair when he reviewed it. If you're terminated as part of a restructuring, the non-compete is basically unenforceable." I thought about the trust fund money that would hit my account tomorrow, about the clients who'd hinted they'd follow me anywhere, about Melissa's whispered threat and Richard's transparent lies. "I need 48 hours, I told Trevor. "Then I'm in." The final act began on Thursday morning with a company-wide email announcing a special pre-holiday gathering in the main conference room at 4 p.m. Champagne and year-end bonuses would be distributed, followed by exciting announcements about Apex's future direction. The office buzzed with speculation all day. I kept to myself, methodically working through client calls and paperwork while occasionally glancing at my personal email, where confirmation of my trust fund transfer had arrived at 10:17 a.m., $1.2 million now sitting in my account. Financial freedom has a way of clarifying your thoughts. At 3:30, I received a text from Trevor. "Papers ready when you are. Say the word." At 3:45, I packed my briefcase with the few personal items from my desk: a Pittsburgh Steelers coffee mug, a photo of my parents, a fountain pen my first client had given me. Everything else could stay. The conference room filled quickly, executives and staff arranging themselves according to the invisible hierarchies that governed our professional lives. Richard stood at the front, with HR Director Janet and CFO Martin Reeves. Melissa positioned herself prominently in the front row, wearing a new dress that probably cost more than my first month's rent in Chicago. I chose a spot by the door, leaning against the wall rather than taking a seat. Richard began with the usual platitudes about record growth, market challenges overcome, and the bright future ahead. Then came the bonus announcements, starting with the junior staff and working up. The amounts were generous, morale-boosting year-end gifts to ensure loyalty. When he reached the senior account executives, Richard paused dramatically. "And now, for the special performance bonus related to the Westridge acquisition, which, as you all know, represents the largest single client in Apex's history." I felt eyes turning toward me, but kept my expression neutral. "This achievement represents not just exceptional sales work, but a new strategic approach that will define Apex's future. Therefore, I'm pleased to announce that the Westridge bonus of $250,000 will be awarded to Melissa Hayes, who will also be stepping into the newly created role of Vice President of Strategic Development, effective January 1st. The room broke into applause. Melissa stood, accepting congratulations with practiced humility, her eyes finding mine across the room. I raised my champagne glass in acknowledgement and took a sip. Richard continued, "Additionally, we'll be restructuring the senior account team to align with our new strategic direction. Details will be communicated individually, but we're excited about what these changes mean for Apex's future." The corporate euphemism wasn't lost on anyone. Restructuring meant cuts, and the timing, announced before Christmas, implemented after New Year's, was calculated to minimize disruption and legal exposure. As the gathering broke into smaller conversations, I made my way to where Melissa stood with Richard and two board members. "Congratulations, Melissa," I said, extending my hand. "Truly impressive work." She took my hand, her grip firm, but her eyes wary. "Thank you, Daniel. I hope we can continue to collaborate effectively during this transition." "About that," I replied, keeping my voice casual, "I wanted to give you both a heads up. I've decided to explore new opportunities." Richard frowned. "Daniel, let's not be hasty. We have a place for you in the new structure. I'm sure you do. But it seems my vision for client relationships differs from the company's new direction." I turned to Melissa. "The Westridge implementation has some nuances you should be aware of. Their CFO can be particular about reporting formats." "I'm sure I can handle it," she replied, a edge in her voice. I have complete faith in you, I said sincerely. Just as I'm sure you'll handle the Preston Group, Atchison Technologies, and MarketSphere accounts with the same innovative approach you brought to Westridge. I saw Richard stiffen. Those three accounts collectively represented nearly 30% of Apex's annual revenue. All clients I had personal relationships with. Perhaps we should discuss this in private, Richard suggested. No need, I replied. I've already accepted a partnership position with Lawson Consulting. I start after the new year. The silence that followed was worth every second of the humiliation I'd endured. You can't take those clients, Melissa finally said. Your contract has a restructuring clause that voids the non-compete, I finished for her. Janet can confirm. It was actually updated last year in the new employment agreement rollout. Janet, who had drifted toward our conversation, gave an almost imperceptible nod to Richard. His face darkened. Of course, I haven't discussed anything with clients yet, I continued. That would be inappropriate while I'm still employed here. But once the restructuring is announced, I shrugged. They'll have choices to make, just like we all do. I finished my champagne and set the glass on a nearby table. I should get going. Early meeting tomorrow. Richard, I'll have my formal resignation letter on your desk in the morning. Melissa, congratulations again on the promotion and bonus. Very well deserved. As I turned to leave, I added, Oh, and Melissa, remember what you said at the holiday party? About my bonus being yours? I smiled. You were right. Enjoy it. Consider it the cost of learning who I really am. I walked out of Apex Solutions for what would be the second to last time, the weight of 8 years lifting from my shoulders with each step. The next morning, I submitted my resignation, had a surprisingly cordial exit interview with Janet, and cleared out the remaining personal items from my office. By noon, my access had been revoked, and I was technically unemployed for the first time since graduate school. I took the elevator down to the lobby of the building where I'd spent nearly a decade of my life. Outside, Chicago was transformed by a fresh snowfall, the afternoon sun creating diamond-like sparkles across the white-covered landscape. My phone buzzed with a text from Trevor. Heard the news. Welcome aboard, partner. We're grabbing drinks at Gibson's at 6 to celebrate. Bring whoever you want. I smiled and pocketed my phone, then pulled out the business card I'd had made just yesterday. Daniel Mercer, partner, Lawson & Mercer Consulting. Trevor had insisted on adding my name to the firm. I walked to the corner and hailed a cab. Michigan Avenue, please, I told the driver. I need to do some Christmas shopping. As the cab pulled away, I gazed back at the glass tower where Apex occupied the top 3 floors. In the reflection, I could see the city I'd come to love, the place where I'd learned that sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't the money, but the wisdom to know when to use it. My grandfather's trust fund hadn't just given me financial security, it had given me the freedom to walk away on my terms. And in the cutthroat world of corporate America, there's no sweeter victory than that. That night at Gibson's, surrounded by Trevor and his team, soon to be my team, I toasted to new beginnings. And when Trevor asked what finally made me decide to leave, I simply said, let's just say I received an unexpected gift, the knowledge that I'm worth more than any bonus. Later, as I drove home along Lakeshore Drive, the city skyline glittering against the night sky, I called my father. Hey Dad, I said when he answered. How would you and Mom like to spend New Year's in Chicago? I've got some news to share.